Hey guys, this is Alex, and welcome to the Two Dudes, Brews, and Reviews podcast. On today's episode, we're talking about Luca Guadagnino's 2018 art house horror film, Suspiria. If you like what you hear, consider subscribing to the podcast, give us a rating, and maybe even tell your friends about us. With that being said, we hope you enjoy the show. I'm still trying to get used to the fact that you're wearing sunglasses inside, like right in front of me right now.
You see your own reflection standing back at you, dude.
It's very strange.
I can take them off if you want.
Oh, no. It's okay.
I'm feeling quite powerful because of it.
I should have brought my sunglasses down here so we could both have Marcos energy.
We don't have any fucking baby hands hanging off our left arm.
God.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of fucking Marcos and baby arms and mutilation and disgust.
Yes.
We're doing we're doing your movie.
We are doing my movie. I decided to discuss the film Suspiria, the 2018 Luca Guadagnino. Could be butchering that quite badly.
Spoken like a true white man.
Yeah. From my understanding, I believe I have caused you a great deal of disgust and discomfort, and I know that going into this podcast, you're probably wondering the question, Getter, why this movie?
Why? What have you done to me?
I would say that when it comes to my turn to recommend things, typically, one of my biggest fears is indifference. I don't want to recommend something that will be very meh. It cannot be denied that this movie will get a reaction.
Okay, let me just preface before we get into it. You know me very well, and I'm not a huge horror guy. I'm just really not. I'm on the fence about it because anytime I associate horror films and what I've seen, it's like I've seen like a handful of like good ones, and I don't even know if I would really consider them horror. Like The Thing is awesome. Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream is more of a thriller, I think. And I've seen like The Conjuring and
yeah, there's good stuff out there.
Yeah. But for some reason, I never got into it because when I was younger, maybe like freshman, sophomore year in high school, I used to hang out with a group of friends, and they were just like really big into horror films, and like shitty horror films, or like things that were so off-putting that they watched them for fun, and they have the ability to laugh at those things, and that's something that I it's a character trait of mine that I don't have. I can't just laugh in disbelief for things because I can't separate myself from the screen very easily.
Okay.
Like, for instance, like I used to have a guy, and we ran into him when we went and saw The Northman. He was one of the guys that I'd kind of said hey to while we were there.
Isn't his name Logan?
Yes, but it's one of those guys.
Okay.
The other one's Brendan, which, you know, cool guys. I'm sure we get along just well these days. But Brendan showed me like Human Centipede and like a Serbian film, like clips from those movies, like in class at school.
Oh my God.
And like stuff like that where I couldn't understand how people could watch stuff like that. It just like and they have the ability to laugh. They have that, not me.
So they're my kind of people.
Yes, they are. They're fucked up just like you, my friend. And also, I have a visual memory, extreme, vivid visual memory, and you know me, I'm able to pull up like random references from shit, and
Constantly.
Yeah. You always say, I don't know how you remember stuff like that, and I just go, I don't know, man. That's just how my brain works. And so when I end up watching shit like this, what's gonna happen now when I put my fucking sunglasses on and go, stuff like that gets burned into my brain.
Yeah.
So it's just I have a hard time getting comfortable and stepping up to the plate on certain things because I know that this could do extreme harm to my visual memory. So it's fine. It's completely cool. But there were a few things that really fucking got to me.
That's perfectly understandable.
Yeah.
Going into this, I actually did not anticipate you having that much of a visceral reaction to some of like the more grotesque parts of this movie.
There's really only one. But there were a few times where I felt like we could have easily got back there, and that made me
You were
so
waiting
anxious.
for it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially because that first one is in like the first 45 minutes, and it's kind of the movie saying, hey, we're doing this, like, be afraid. It is kind of shocking that it doesn't go back to it very often. We are sort of hanging out in all these other side plots, and
I enjoyed that stuff, don't get me wrong. The movie's very long, though. A little
dear
over.
God, is it long. I hope that you realize why this is one I wanted to single out, though. I think there's a lot of weird context with this movie, both inside and outside of it. I mean, we have this Luca guy who is fresh off an Academy Award-winning movie with Call Me by Your Name. Mm-hmm. He's mostly known for doing these romantic, like, hangout in a foreign country films. So for him to come along and say, hey, I'm going to do a remake of this 70s cult classic movie, and I'm going to, like, change everything about it. I'm going to give Tilda Swinton 3 different roles to play in it.
Mm-hmm. I picked up on that. You had prefaced that before I watched it. Like, she plays 3 characters.
Yeah.
I was able to figure it out pretty quickly.
It's very strange. I mean, Tom York on the soundtrack, a lot of stuff intrigues me about it, especially with it focusing on this hyper-specific time in history in Berlin. I think it's a lot of really weird elements coming together with varying degrees of success. You know what I mean?
That's a good way to put it. I think it missed the mark on a few different elements like that. I don't think the Berlin Wall, like, rebellion thing came across very well.
No, it didn't.
Like, really confused me. Like, I think you could have, like, completely scrapped that angle of the film, and you'd have been able to cut at least, like, 15, 20 minutes of the film because of that.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that would have helped a lot, maybe, like, achieve a more sinister tone. Because I think the moments of the film that are, like, pretty dark and, like harrowing and uncomfortable are done pretty well for the most part. There was a few times where I thought it was super fucking campy. And there was callback shots from, like, 70s horror cinema, like snap zoom, and when she's eating dinner with Mother Blanc and presumably a hidden corridor or her hidden room in the company, and she shakes her hands, dries her hands, and you get that over the shoulder shot. Like, that stuff was great, and like had really nice grain to the film there, and I enjoyed that stuff.
It's a huge variety of, like, old styles coming together here. I can praise the fact that this movie was definitely made with a vision. Like, somebody had an idea and they went for it. But God, there's like moments of brilliance, but I think a lot of the times this movie, like, misfires really badly. And it's weird because it kind of checks a lot of the boxes for me. Like, we got character drama and, like, all this weird subtext. We got body horror, like, really tense atmospheric stuff. And God, I watched it 3 times over the last month. So I've spent 7.5 hours in this fucking universe. Each viewing, I liked the movie less. The first time around, I was like, wow, really interesting. Like, that was, like, I'll remember that forever. And then, God, those cracks really start to show the more I watched it.
Something that bothered me is once I figured out that Tilda Swinton was playing the doctor, like the psychiatrist, I got really frustrated because I guess I didn't really understand why that decision was made. And not to say that vocal acting wasn't good and be able to, like, keep a different, like, the gait, like, you're walking your gait, like the way you...
Well, like the way she carries herself as this character.
Yeah, and just being able to differentiate, like, obviously playing Mother Blanc, she's, like, almost, like, stoic, unemotive, slender, perfect posture, you know what I mean? Like, very clean cut. And then to be able to move into an old man, and that was cool, but I was able to figure out quickly because of the prosthetics on the face were really frustrating to me at times.
They looked really heavy. Like, she was having trouble doing, like, facial acting while playing this character.
I think maybe part of that was you could have done the cheeks and the eyes, but the mouth was really frustrating. It looked like fucking Men in Black, like skin hanging off your bones, drinking sugar water cockroach guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That kind of bothered me a lot.
At best, it's okay. At worst, it's terribly distracting.
Like, that character specifically is put through the ringer, being the witness and, like, trying to cry. Like, kissing his wife was, like, you can tell like, they couldn't get the mouth closed. You know what I mean? Like, it was off. Like, they had to cover the angle.
I was really curious about how this decision was made.
Yeah.
And I believe that Swinton, it was her idea to do this. You know that they pretended as if this was, like, a real man that was in this movie. Like, they credit it, like, in the credits as under a fake name. They made, like, a fake IMDb page for this actor, and they promoted it by saying, like, hey, we have this new actor. It's his first movie. And of course, like, the second he's on screen, it's like, it's Tilda Swinton in old man makeup. God, it's so weird.
Yeah, it was kind of bothersome. I don't know why that decision was kind of greenlit. I think it looks fun on paper, but you really have to execute well. And I think it kind of just adds to the list of cons that go on throughout the film. And, you know, it kind of helps push the movie into like more of meh territory.
They really should have done something to her voice. Like they should have pitched it down a little bit, like changed the octave.
They easily could have done that too.
Because the makeup and all these accessories that she's wearing are so heavy, they clearly had to ADR every scene that the doctor is speaking in.
Yeah.
And this became so distracting to me because I like the character.
Yeah.
Actually, it was just these choices that they make in this movie. It throws things off.
Something with that as well, because the scene opens up with that character and Sophia, who plays
I'm talking about Chloe Grace Moretz.
She doesn't play Patricia.
No, she plays Patricia.
Oh, she plays Patricia. Okay.
She's kind of like the catalyst for the whole story kicking off in a way.
I think it's a little too jarring the way the film opens up, because I think you don't really figure out what is happening until close near the end of the film. It's such like a fast start, and also there's so many fucking quick cuts. It's so disorienting and nauseating. And not to say that wouldn't work well, I just think it's a poor choice to open the film that way, because you're trying to get comfortable and set your story up at a good, you try to get everybody on the same page, and then we can move forward and get a little creepy, which is fine. But like starting off the first 15 minutes like that, it was really frustrating.
It would have been fine if the rest of the movie was more of like a fast-paced affair where like that would be the tone setter, but it's more of an outlier.
Yeah.
And I think the scene is hurt really badly because I don't think Chloe Grace's performance as this character is very good in the first few minutes.
Yeah.
Her line delivery is... it really hits me when she starts saying the lines like, they took my urine, they took my eyes. Like,
yeah.
It was really off.
It felt like, obviously, if you're trying to like portray someone in like in a schizophrenic, kind of delusional state of mind, I don't think that even like the portrayal of the character doesn't even seem like the character even believes what she's saying,
Yeah.
Like kind of like talking to no one in the room, like looking around, running around this room and picking up objects and laying them down. It kind of felt like not even like a plea for help, more like I'm just gonna get weird in this room for a second.
Yeah.
I don't know. It didn't seem right. I think it even makes it harder because you don't know the context of the character yet to understand why she would even be acting this way.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe if it came a little later, like the choice to maybe put that character when Dakota Johnson's character arrives. Her name's Sophie, right?
Susie,
sorry. God.
there's kind of a lot of characters in this movie to keep track of, so I completely get it.
Eventually I'll start referring to people by their ad-lib name eventually. Like there's somebody that looks exactly like fucking Severus Snape. Like one of the mothers looks like fucking... I think it was hard to keep track of what was going on. I think if you maybe introduce that character once she arrives to the school, the company, it would feel like kind of give her the Olga treatment of making it kind of feel like she already had her foot in the door in this company, and then she steps out to see this doctor, but never have her come back and talk to the company, because she ends up disappearing, which is perfectly fine. But you don't understand. Also, you have like French, German, and English, and so it becomes disorienting, and it's hard to even recognize who they're talking about.
Yeah.
Talking about her missing, it's like, wait, who's missing? I don't understand.
Because you didn't really get enough time with that character
Right.
to like remember her name even.
Right.
Really. It's kind of a flimsy way to start the movie. Like I'm not a fan of this first scene at all. I've been really negative so far, but I think once the first act starts to get going, I do like the first hour of this film quite a bit after that therapist scene. I mean, especially with like Susie arriving from America and like her kind of making her way into the dance company. Like that's all stuff that I enjoy quite a bit. But God, my feelings change so much throughout the movie. There's times where I'm watching it and I'm like, wow, this is really brilliant. And then there are times where I actively hate it. I'm sure you probably have some of the same feelings.
I think once I end up getting comfortable with the film, I immediately want to turn it off because we get introduced to like, I think the scene's called like Olga's Destruction.
I think that's the
soundtrack title.
Yeah, that's right. Did we mention this is a film divided into 6 acts?
Yeah.
And an epilogue and a post-credits scene, which you may have missed.
I did miss the post-credits scene.
You didn't miss anything.
Okay. You tell me about
I'll
it.
explain it later.
Like, I actively wanted to throw up. And to give a positive before I, like, absolutely am revolted by the heinous act on screen, the fucking sound design is fucking great. Like, the sound of crunching and all that shit. Like,
it's so good.
It's good.
It's not fun to watch.
It's because it's good is why I hate it so much. And I actually think I would like this movie more if it was as campy as the ending of the film.
Okay. See, I hate the ending of the movie.
I do too, but I think it would have been more fun.
Yeah.
In that way. And it would earn more of like a hilarious respect from me rather than like this discomfort that's brought to me, like the vomit and the blood like coming out of her mouth, and oh my god, it's so long too.
She also urinates on herself.
Fucking Christ. Oh fuck, I can't.
I think the entire sequence with Olga is awesome. Yeah. Like from the moment where they're in the dance studio and she has her freak out.
God, you fucking
I know.
psychopath.
I know. I think this is honestly among the best of what horror has to offer. Like, I love when she's going down the stairs and she runs into that teacher, and there's like this weird moment where it pauses on the teacher's face. Like, it's super unsettling.
Mm-hmm. Somebody upside down at some point, I think. Like, her face is upside down.
Yeah, the editing is crazy in the sequence. Were you confused by her crying, the tears blinding her to make her accidentally walk into that mirrored room?
The way I viewed it was like after the fact was she was crying because she knew she was going to die, but like almost like being in hypnosis, unable to like control her body. I was confused by they would cut to one of the mothers and she was weeping as well.
Yeah, it's the one character that kind of looks like that lady from The Incredibles that makes the superhero costumes.
No kidding.
That character, they cut away to her quite often throughout the movie, but I don't remember her ever having any dialogue or being given a name.
Nope.
But she has kind of her own mini arc throughout the movie.
I don't think I picked up on this.
It's not something I got till like the second or third viewing. I kind of got the vibe that she was more of like a telepathic witch, like she felt things more strongly. Because were you confused later in the movie when she like just randomly stabs herself at that dinner table?
I wasn't confused by it because I was kind of putting it in. I was kind of putting it in a frame of like, yeah, if she was like telepathic or like this heavily empathic.
That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think they go hand in hand. Like she had to feel the people she was manipulating or something. I think I kind of viewed that specifically because she doesn't have dialogue. And maybe she's reluctant to do these things. Like even Mother Blanc at times is reluctant to carry out some of these things that the other witches vote for. So I kind of framed her in that light. Like maybe she wasn't completely on board.
So she like felt bad and that's why she did it.
And then after the movie's over, I viewed her in a different light. And we'll get there. I will talk about it. But what ends up happening to like our Severus Snape looking mother, I think the way that character's arc ends, I kind of viewed it a little differently. And I might be missing the mark in this way, but I almost felt a lot of this was cyclical.
Okay.
Like it kind of continued over and over again. Yeah, I mean, like the Olga stuff was fucking. It was rough. Man, it was rough for me. It was fucking awesome. Like I believed every moment of it, and that's why I hated it.
I think the special effects in Olga's scene are so good because it's all practical. And I assumed that there was some kind of CG element being used. I don't think there is. They got a stunt double that's a contortionist who was able to actually do this, but then they had like prosthetics that kind of showed like the grosser side,
the bruising and all that,
the cracked ribs.
Oh my god!
Fuck, God, it was. You know, the part of the scene that bugs me the most actually is when the witches come out with like the meat hooks.
Yeah,
that's the part that gets me.
Fuck,
because those prosthetics are really good too. But God, yeah,
like they're like little sickles almost.
Yeah,
like, yeah, it's rough. I completely like kind of skipped over it, but when this scene starts, you get like Susie's stepping up into like the protagonist role of this dance. I think like the way you get introduced to the scene with they kind of meet, she's meeting everyone, and having Tom York do the soundtrack, it completely fit, but like the rewinding of the track was just like, it sounded like a ghoul in the room, like a ghost,
I love this motif.
Really
that
subtle
they use.
stuff. Yeah.
Would you consider this to be like the main musical theme of the movie? The tune that plays when they're like dancing. I think it's titled Volk, like after the dance that they do.
Yeah.
Anytime the movie decides to get creepy, that little theme comes up again.
It's like almost like I don't want to say jazz chords, but
there's something heavily dissonant going on with it.
I love that, and I appreciate it. Can I say to you, the night I started the film was after we went bowling, and we were kind of heavily under the influence of alcohol. And for some reason, when I started the film, I was, okay, I'll try to get as far as I can, and I went to bed. But when I went to bed, I was like, I'll just throw the soundtrack on. Why the fuck not?
And how'd that go over for you?
And I ended up falling asleep when it started playing. Because I think I put on Unmade, and then I just pressed shuffle. But then I woke up at like 4 a.m., and it just sounded like death in my room. And I'm like, and we're not doing this. Like, it was so fucking scary.
There's something so weird about the soundtrack and the fact that it's Tom York being at the helm of all these songs. When I heard that he was doing the soundtrack a couple years ago, of course I followed it a little bit because like I'm a big Radiohead fan and everything, and I thought, you know what, that Radiohead, they do kind of like glitchy, how would I say this? There's like this glitchy element to their music. Like, so I figured this movie would be electronic based. And it turns out that we get a bunch of these really pretty piano ballads over some horrific scenes. God, it's so weird. Their placement, I will say this, I think is a little misused at times.
And what scenes particular?
Oh, the finale.
Yeah. And I had mentioned something to you. I said, because you showed me this song last time we recorded, and I was like, man, that song is fucking beautiful. And I like really got hooked on it, and I like kept it in heavy rotation for the last few weeks. And then I had said something to you at work, and I said, is that song? I'm like, it's going to completely change the way I view it once I watch the film, isn't it?
It changed for me, that's for sure. But its usage was totally wrong right there.
I don't know. I don't want to get to the climax of the film yet, but I do think it was a missed mark for sure. Oh, yeah. I think like if you would have done something more sinister, like Volk or like similar to Olga's death, it would have been great. But there were more decisions made besides the soundtrack placement that I think ruined it. We'll get there. But something that was really confusing to me, and I think it's kind of, how do you put it? Like kind of piggybacks off the similar usage of like these fast cuts and all these stuff that happens at the beginning of the film where you're kind of just really, you don't really understand what's going on quite yet. There'd be like dinner scenes, and this is like a very similar thing that gets motifed throughout the rest of the film over and over again. Like these dinner meetings with all the witches. It's overdubbed conversation, but it's not actually happening in the room.
They're like communicating telepathically.
Yeah, and I didn't catch that until like a little later in the film, where I think it becomes more apparent and obvious. I think like once Susie kind of helms the role of like this vessel, it becomes a little bit more apparent that like her staring at Blanc across the dinner table, there wasn't a choice there to overdub anything, but it kind of felt like they were having a conversation across the table, type of thing. Although it kind of seems like she's been lobotomized in sorts. I don't know. Like she
Who's Susie?
Yeah, she becomes like so unemotive by the end. It like kind of bizarre.
I think she kind of starts that way. I think she's kind of a weirdo from the beginning.
I think Dakota Johnson is made for the role, maybe. She's very beautiful, like beautiful face. Red hair looks good on her, but I don't know. I think she does capture the I don't know why I'm here, but I'm doing it kind of type of character pretty well. I don't mean that as a dig or anything. I think she did fine.
She did fine. That's the way to put it. I don't think that her line delivery was amazing or anything. I think the character kind of requires her to be very understated.
I was going to say, I don't think the character's really made for much like heavy emotive line delivery in the first place. I think she is, I don't know. The film kind of brings up moments of the themes of like destiny and being drawn somewhere and you're not necessarily sure why. Like similar to like Dark Souls. There's like there's stuff like that. Like I don't think it was really meant to be more than just I don't know.
Like she's just a weird girl with something going on inside of her.
Yeah, like runaway type of I don't know, wallflowery. I don't know. But she never really felt rebellious or anything. It kind of felt like, how do I put this? She seems extremely overqualified for the amount of like, I don't give a fuck that she brings. Like just being here and being happy about it. Like being lobotomized in a way. Like just being like, I'm here and my life is good.
Yeah, where she doesn't really question the weird shit that eventually starts going on around her.
I don't think the character ever gets explored either in a way that like gets pulled back to her youth to where maybe it would be more apparent. Like there is a cutaway, like she's from Ohio, ha ha ha. You know, we got a bunch of crazy bitches here for sure, but
not quite on this level.
No.
Well, debatable.
You met my wife, huh? Fucking, she just seems like you know, you get that callback flashback scene of like her being a kid and like they're studying like the U.S. and she colors in Ohio with her lead pencil and draws lines to Berlin, and I never really felt that was an angle done very well.
I don't think it was either.
By the end of the film, it's like it's insinuating that from the beginning she is meant to be some sort of sin and this like ultimate evil, which, you know, she helms the role of Mother Superiorum or whatever the fuck, and I never really felt that the character had enough weight to maybe like be thrusted into that role. Like you never get a cutback of like her killing animals or, you know what I mean, like some weird shit. It kind of just felt like false innocence in a way. It never came across really blatant, like sinister, and it never really came across like innocent either, and it's just somewhere juxtaposed between the both.
I don't think the Suspiriorum spirit is really awakened in her until much later on. So I could see that's why there's not a bunch of sinister shit before that point. Her character arc is actually something that frustrates me a lot because when she's first introduced, she's kind of our protagonist for a little bit. And I think once we start getting deeper into like the second act where like Susie is rising in the ranks and everything, she kind of becomes complicit in what's going on there. You kind of lose her as a protagonist. And she's not really replaced with anybody else. A film like this, where there's a bunch of mystery and intrigue, requires what I sometimes refer to as like the audience surrogate, where we need somebody to experience the weirdness with us that'll have the same reactions to all this weird shit going on.
I think like killing Olga early.
Big mistake, maybe.
Yeah.
And like Sarah is kind of that for a little bit.
Yeah, it's Mia Goth's character, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen until like deep into the film, like hour and a half. And the last act is in like an hour long.
Is it really?
Yeah, like or act 5 and 6 is like an hour long. I think the last act is about 30 to 40 minutes long.
Yeah.
But Mia Goth kind of becomes that, like she becomes like
the one to like investigate and be worried about these missing women.
And also maybe the doctor kind of plays that role, but
a little bit.
But I don't know.
It doesn't really hit it though.
Yeah, he never feels like that serious about it, and I think maybe the way his scenes were cut in, like him going down to the police station, him talking to Mia Goth, like it felt like it came really late.
This needed to be in like act 1 or 2.
There needed to be more tension built for those characters. Like kind of felt like they discovered, and then it was like, and now they're being thrusted into this final conflict, which I don't really think it gave those characters enough time to breathe and settle into that that knowledge. And I think if you'd have done it earlier, it'd have been more impactful. Like maybe watching Susie kind of go through this transition into and not questioning. There's no reluctance from her, and you could watch that be reflected in other characters. Like you do get it with Mia Goth briefly, but then it's like it almost feels like months or weeks have passed.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, and now we're at the final act. It doesn't really give enough time for that tension to build. I think the final act, the climax, feels really empty.
It does.
For the most part. And I think that might be because we don't get a good tension built. Maybe killing Olga past an hour, like get a slow burn into that. I don't know. It just kind of felt like this really intense moment happened. And the only reason why I was disgusted was because it was disgusting. I never felt anything for the character. It was just gruesome. Like I didn't feel bad for the character because it was so early.
Well, she's introduced and then she's dead 5 minutes later.
Right. And maybe like choosing to do that with Patricia first would have been a better role. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you get to it's the first person we see besides the doctor, and then she just disappears until like the last 5 minutes. And then when you find her, I'm like, I didn't feel any like grand discovery. I was like, oh, like
Here she is.
Yeah, like I I would have forgotten about her. You know what I mean? Like she was such a
Yeah.
non-character by the end.
You bring up the lack of tension, and this is something I completely agree with, because in the original Suspiria, the entire movie is them figuring out what the weird thing going on is. In this new one, they're witches.
Yeah.
Right off the bat.
You know.
We spend almost as much or more time hanging out with like Tilda Swinton and like the rest of the administrative people in this group to where you kind of know what's going on both sides at all times.
Yeah, you're being spoon-fed a lot.
Yeah. I think having Sarah as more of like of the audience surrogate character would have given the film a little bit more weight. I think that her portrayal as this character was really good. And
she's awesome.
I think she came across like very like sweet and nice in her scenes. And I actually did care for her up until the point where like she meets a terrible demise in a way.
God, that bones poking through the skin is not my thing either. Dude.
No, me either.
I listened to this. I watched the film with headphones on. I have to take my headphones off. Watching someone scream in agony. She does a great job. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah,
great. She's like the best or one of the best actors or actresses in this film.
Oh, for sure.
Wait, I guess it is.
She's gonna be huge.
Yeah, I mean, she did X.
And she did like the prequel to that movie that just came out, Pearl.
Yep.
I think there's another one on the way already.
She kind of feels similar path to like Anya Taylor-Joy in a way.
I hope so, because I think she's really good.
Yeah, she's great.
Even though I didn't like the movie X when I saw it, I think that she was a highlight in it. Pertaining to her in this movie, it would have been really nice to get more of her character kind of reacting to Susie becoming more ingrained into like the whole witch thing, because they have like a nice little friendship thing going on for that first act or two, and then it's like they don't interact again really. And by the time that Susie reaches like the pinnacle of like her realizing who she is, Sarah is already like in a trance and like it doesn't matter anymore.
She does have like one moment, and she says something along the lines of like, "Do you know what you're doing? Like, do you know what this is going to cost?" And she said, Susie's like, "I don't know what you're talking about. You just haven't seen the bill yet." I'm like, damn.
Yeah, that was good too.
That's great writing. One of like, I think the few moments in the film.
Yeah.
Piss break.
I think the character I thought had the best line delivery for the most part was either Mia Goth or Tilda Swinton, I guess. I never really questioned Tilda Swinton's presence on the screen or anything. I never felt like she really missed the mark.
No, I agree. I mean, she's a great actress in general.
Because she has such a witch face. She has like a witch face. She's like so like sleek, slender, beautiful, but somewhat sinister. She's also in like a bunch of what's it called? Jesus, blanking. Director Wes Anderson. There we go. She's in a bunch of Wes Anderson films.
Yeah, that's true. I always think of her as being, at least nowadays, and this might be kind of bad, as like the bald. What is she in this movie? In the Doctor Strange? Yeah.
She plays one of the monks.
So fucking weird. I don't question her like presence in this movie at all. I think she's fine. Considering that she has 3 different roles in it, I think she's actually a little bit underused. I don't think that Blanc has much range. And like the scenes that Blanc is in doesn't really require her to have a lot of range.
What comes to mind, it might be reflective of her as an actress, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. Her character and the way she portrays like indifference, it always comes across as like internal. Like she very rarely moves her eyebrows in like an emotive way, very rarely overacts. And I think sometimes she underacts with her face. She'll do a thing where she'll like look up and to the right or to the left, act like she's listening to something. It's very rarely like a one-on-one interaction. It's supposed to emote like discovery or like this internal dialogue, and I don't know.
There's a subtlety to her performance.
Yeah.
And I respect that a lot. Maybe it's the dialogue that these characters speak that I'm not a huge fan of.
The dialogue is something I didn't really pay too much attention to because half the time I'm reading it. And I think Dakota Johnson, her voice is so alien compared to a lot that is going on. I don't know. kind of feel like I have a hard time getting in a flow. You know what I mean?
I agree.
Things kind of feel a little out of place back and forth. I do love the scene of her reading the newspaper, smoking a cigarette, talking about, I'll make the decision when she's ready.
I like
enjoyed
that one too.
And I think why I liked it was because I felt like we had only been, for the most part, viewing the witches in some sinister role and not necessarily like a communal environment, and like seeing them just like eating breakfast and like smoking cigarettes and reading the newspaper. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess, I mean, like they wouldn't cut out completely like day-to-day interactions of like normal people. I mean, like they still go about their day. Everybody else, I guess, in that era.
It was cool seeing them like in this hangout environment. And I think that scene specifically where she's talking to, I want to say it's, God, I wish I could remember the name. Miss Tanner, maybe? The one with like the straight chop bangs. Not bangs, but you know what I mean.
Just black hair.
Yeah.
Severus Snape. Yeah.
This scene actually gives you a better feel of the political divide that's going on with these witches, which I think is like a very underused story element in the film, because that's like one of the things that I was wanting more of and that I was super intrigued by. But as long as this movie is, I feel like it didn't explore that element nearly enough.
No, and I think part of that, I think Swinton's character as Blanc was a little bit more fleshed out compared to the other witches, obviously because I think she's given a lot more screen time and more weight to her character. But like specifically when Olga, when she runs out before her death, and like the other witches like laughing, and it's like very apparent that they're sinister people. Like it's not just like a laugh it off, like, okay, back to work. Mother Blanc is so much better at like concealing the fact, where I felt like all the other mothers were leaning so heavily into like their pride of being witches or something. It was so different. That might have been an angle they were trying to shoot for. Visually, they were trying to push that, like there is separation, but I think it kind of came across as like, it doesn't really feel like these actors are on the same page.
Yeah.
The performances were kind of, how do you put it? Like, not everybody was on the same wavelength of how they're going to portray these characters. And I know, like, a lot of shit's just dialogue on a piece of paper and they figure it out in that room, but...
Yeah.
And I think the reluctance definitely comes across right before the climax, you know, right before like the final dance or whatever. But like all the other witches seemed extremely happy even when something goes wrong, like particularly when Mia Goth's character, can't remember her name, Sarah, she like trips into a seizure or like you know, starts shaking and screaming during like the public dance of the rebirth or whatever they're calling it. Like all the other witches have like a smirk and a smile, like this they're happy about this.
Yeah.
And Swinton's always like, I kind of feel like she's in that role of not completely leaning in like the rest of the mothers. I don't know, it just kind of felt, I don't know why they made that choice, because by the end I guess it feels like that's what they were going for, maybe because she's so reluctant.
And maybe it has something to do with the fact that Marcos is the leader, and she's clearly like the more evil one out of all of them. So like them following under Marcos' direction, and like Swinton is the one that kind of is against that.
I think not seeing Marcos on screen until the last 5 minutes is a big misstep too.
That's the big fucking thing, man. We have a divide where we only see one side of the struggle.
I was, it like took me a second. I'm like, oh, that's who that is. I'm like, who is this fucking sack of meat in this chair?
She only shows up in like photos.
And I didn't know what the fuck. I mean, I knew that was Swinton, but I didn't understand. Like, what the fuck is this picture of? It didn't make any sense. There isn't enough context.
Yeah,
I think it might have been different if you would have been able to see Marcos on screen, like through the peephole of like Mia Goth's, you know, Sarah's character, like when she sneaks in the basement or whatever. Like that would have been big. That would have been like, okay, because you already stepped down into this fucking weird head shop down in the basement, like with all these weird fucking statues and shit.
Yeah.
But you don't get to see what's going on through that door. I know they're trying to revive the bitch that stabs herself in the neck, but it was a misstep. You're trying to process so much going on those last 15, 20 minutes where I'm like, okay, like then... And then it keeps happening, and I'm like, I don't have enough time
to stop and think about it.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Marcos should have definitely been a bigger part of the story, And we'll get to the finale, like probably towards the end of this conversation. But I have a lot to say about how she's actually used once she shows up on screen.
Okay.
But we'll get there. Like, speaking of like the political divide, I do want to like bring attention to a sequence that I loved a lot, and that's the voting scene. This is one of my favorite, like, several minutes of the movie, where you're getting this long continuous shot, and we're like kind of like going through this kitchen. Everybody is reading off like who they vote for. Like, what about you, Marcos? There's like this weird trip hop bass heavy song playing in the background, and it's all one continuous shot all the way until they get to like the dinner table, and then we're like hanging out with like this telepathic conversation going on. I think this scene brings a lot of intrigue about the political divide that we've been talking about. That's like the height of it, though. Like, that story peaks right there and then is never developed upon like in a satisfying way ever again. It's really frustrating.
We didn't really talk about it, but I think one of the best uses of like imagery throughout the film was the notebook left with the doctor.
Yeah.
Like seeing like this web of names connected together and having like was it Mother Marcos or was it Mother Blanc at the center? I can't remember. There's like a bunch of like all the names of the mothers like tied together and like what
There's
like,
three of them.
Yeah.
Suspiria, and then like two others that I fucking
Yeah.
like. I don't think I could even like pronounce the names of.
I don't know. I think it was really smart, like showing drawings and diagrams of like the human body, and I think using dance as presumably as like glyphs and energy, and it doesn't go like super detailed. It wasn't like some sort of like hard magic system written out on paper or anything like that, but it does add like intrigue where we're trying to teach Susie how to jump higher. The girl that can jump really high, they like shift that spirit into her, like that energy into her, like giving that girl a seizure and like watching, you know, stuff like that was really smart. And I think that was like one of the best elements of the film, where it does feel like, you know, these witches, like the system feels very authentic and has good weight to it, and I don't question that.
There's like a deep mythology.
Like a cult, stuff like that, where I completely buy into that system that's being used throughout the film.
But the movie has a hard time making you or I, as audience members, care by the end, where I think they kind of throw it away in the final 20 minutes. I don't want to move on from the dialogue too fast. We kind of like jumped from it real quick. I thought the dialogue in this movie was super heavy-handed and very like expository, where you know what I mean? Each scene was kind of like a big exposition dump, but it wasn't enough info because it would still be very ambiguous at the same time.
The Nolan problem. It's referred to as the Nolan problem, and
this is worse.
Yeah.
This is worse.
Yeah, exposition dump. I mean, I get, okay, I see what you're saying. Like, there would be a lot being said, but it was so vague, it never really, like, accomplished anything.
Yeah.
When you watch Tenet, you'll feel like that.
I think the movie has a hard time balancing between being mysteriously interesting and then annoyingly ambiguous. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it teeters towards that ambiguous side so much more. I want to be given a reason to care about all this stuff going on.
Part of it, to me, and especially by the end, I kept asking myself, like, but why?
Yeah.
But, like, why is this important? I was like, what is the purpose of bringing forth a vessel? It felt very bizarre. And I guess you get to figure out in that final act,
kind of,
I guess, like Marcos was looking for a body, but that was never really blatantly discussed. Like, they would allude to her being a vessel, but I'm like, vessel for what? I never picked up on that. I'm like, why? Vessel for what? Like, bring forth fucking Satan? I'm like, what? Like, I don't know. I'm like, is this tied to any sort of Christian? It felt very bizarre.
I didn't understand the importance of the three mothers. Like, is it kind of like subsets of religions where like maybe there are some covens throughout the world that worship this mother, and then there are some that worship the others, and I didn't understand like what Madame Suspiriorum is able to do.
You don't know. There isn't enough context. And I think Patricia's Notebook was like interesting in that way, because I felt like you were getting a little bit. There wasn't really any like time to figure out what the fuck was going on. Yeah, I don't know. It's frustrating because by the end I'm like, okay, why?
Yeah.
I believed it while it was happening. And you kind of mentioned like after you've watched the film multiple times, it gets worse for you.
Yeah.
I think that intrigue was really good because I only watched the movie once, thank fucking God. But when I was along for the ride, I was very curious and I thought we would get more, and it never really came. It never really came to full fruition, but
it starts falling apart the closer to the end you get. I will say I enjoyed the scenes with Dr. Klimper, like with Sarah, or with when he like goes to the police and he's kind of talking about how people will commit crimes and call it magic, like delusion is truth or something like that. That's religion. Like there's like there are smart lines of dialogue.
I didn't pick up on any of that.
You didn't pick up on any of that?
When he went, I picked up on him saying people will commit crimes and say it's magic.
Yeah.
And that immediately brought me back to, I listened to, I believe there's a podcast in, old buddy Ryan used to be big on it. It was Small Town Murder. And I had listened to one from Ohio. I think it was like Lebanon or something. I can't remember, but
I listened to it as well.
Is it the one where this guy was really into the occult and like would worship Satan and stuff and like kill people for Satan and shit like that? And yeah, they'll commit crimes and say it's magic. And that's what it brought me to, because there was like things like that happening like in the early 80s and the 70s and shit.
And it kind of coincides with the protester Berlin stuff that's going on the outside, like the fringes of this movie, where I don't know if,
I completely forget that was a thing.
You could take it out of the movie and it wouldn't mean much, but do you understand kind of what the German autumn thing is, like the protesters? Like, do you understand what that whole
I have no idea what happened during the Berlin Wall.
It's because all these people were protesting and committing terroristic acts because after World War II, a lot of the Nazi regime was able to walk free, and they became bankers and politicians, and they held positions of power.
And worked at NASA.
Oh, God, a lot of them did make it over here, and like were given comfy jobs in the U.S., but those people were protesting like the stench of Nazism. Like they were trying to get rid of it because the country of Germany, it still had that, like people still thought about it in that way, and they were trying to move on.
Even though they lost the war, it's like, I don't want to like bring up politics now, but it's like the fringes of both sides become like they echo farther into the future than you wish they would.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. It's frustrating.
And I think it was smart to put it in here, but it just wasn't expanded upon enough. I mean, there's a whole 2 to 3 minute section where we're basically, it's almost like we're being read like a Wikipedia article where they're just talking about the terrorist and the person on the plane. It was like, you could have cut this out and nothing would have been missing from the film.
It was a poor choice. I think that angle was a poor choice.
Yeah. It could have been going on in the background the whole time, but we didn't need to need to have characters talk about it. And I know it's supposed to like kind of echo the divide between the witches, but it just never felt like.
Yeah, you say that, but I never got that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
like why'd they do that?
Besides the missteps, I do think like the dancing was fucking awesome. Like I appreciate stuff like that. I mean.
This is the best stuff in the movie.
In the end, I'm like aghast by it, but it was also like, I'm like, God damn, they did have the balls to go here. Like, fuck yeah. I know you haven't read it, but in Berserk, there's like a subplot that happens deeper into the story, and it's like echoed in the first real arc of the story. Occultism, what presumably would be like the Roman Catholic Church of this world. There is like a occultism orgy, naked people roaming around the damn campfire and shit, stuff like back to like paganism. Like when we watch The Northman, for some reason it keeps coming up in my brain, and I thought about this. It was like a shower thought, but I'm like, oh yeah, like back then when you would do like these fertility rituals or like these what essentially are like sex parties, I'm like, they go out and fuck each other in the woods. And I'm like thinking to myself, I'm like, oh yeah, like they're probably doing like 3Bs and all that bullshit. Like I'm like, weird thought, but like the fact that they even go there at the end of like literally just having naked women dance around
everywhere.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. And I wasn't even like aghast by it at that point because I have been a little bit desensitized to it from
This is true.
from Berserk and stuff, and obviously through the film I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not surprised because like there are a lot of like erotic elements. Susie will literally just be dry humping the fucking ground.
Yeah.
And there's dialogue. Mother Blanc is asking, how does it feel when you're dancing? And she's like, it must be like what it's like to fuck
You mean a man?
an animal. I'm like, what? Which that immediately like gave me imagery from like Berserk and stuff because there's some weird shit that goes on in those books.
Yeah.
It's a very adult, heavily thematic, but
Hey, I'm still meaning to read that copy that you...
oh, it's there for you when you want to, but I wasn't surprised. And I think stuff like that is really smart, and I thought it was great.
No, the dancing sequences are my favorite of the movie. All of them, actually, down to Susie's audition, where like she dances for them without music, and it's just this silent scene of like flesh hitting the ground and her clothes whipping through the air. I mean, like, and you said the sound design's really good. God, it shines in some of these parts.
Yeah, and like the cinematography is great, and the editing is amazing around these moments, especially like when they give like the public performance, where like the costume design's good, and like seeing like promotional material for the film, like stuff like that's really smart. And like using the human form to almost like represent like occult, like ritualistic lines in the sand, like drawing glyphs and like pentagrams and all that shit. Like that stuff's really smart, and I think it's one of the best things the film does.
This final dance sequence goes on so long that it literally puts me in a trance.
Yeah,
Like the other night when I watched it, I felt hypnotized by it. And it's especially helped because that Volk musical motif comes back, but it's expanded upon where you have these like messy jazz drums come in. Like it's so intense, so animalistic. It's definitely one of like the highlights of this very long fucking movie.
How do you fix that though? Like I think the movie tries to do way too much.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think if you would kind of maybe play that lane, really lean heavily into the occult, ditch like the political, give better timing on the character drama, the placing of like introduction and death.
Dude, there are long scenes of Dr. Klimper just walking down the street. It almost became comical at one point where like we watch him turn a corner. I'm like, okay, we're cutting into the next scene. Nope. He's on the street and he's walking for another block.
You say that, and I kind of actually liked it because in my head I'm like, this is so like anti-her. Like it feels like the inverse, like the dark side of it, because the soundtrack it's like beautiful but extremely depressing and scary at the same time. And in Her, it's like he's walking around with fucking sunshine on his face. Like it's the happiest shit in the world.
Well, this is a very bleak atmosphere that the movie gives you.
Yeah,
I mean, it's always raining or snowing.
In cinematography, it chooses to be extremely bleak. Like the color palette is so dry, which is not a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing at all.
No, it's trying to set itself apart from the original Suspiria, which was like super colorful. I guess they decided that like avoiding the color spectrum would be a choice, like a good choice in this movie. But God, some of these scenes are so overindulgent.
Yeah. I don't understand like the weird wispy illusion hanging in the rooms and stuff.
Like the light?
Yeah.
I think that's supposed to be Blanc's presence on Susie's dreams.
Yeah, okay.
Because this movie actually is very light on horror. And in those scenes where we kind of get like these dream sequences, that's like where some of the more horrific stuff comes in. And I actually did like those weird quick cuts.
Oh, they're disturbing, yeah.
Yeah, they are.
Decaying flesh, like almost zombie-like skeleton.
I think all of them have relevance to the story. It wasn't until the second viewing where I realized that a lot of these images that appear in the dream sequences like do have relevance to what's going on in the story. You get cuts of broken mirrors. You get a hairball in a toilet for some reason, which is brought up in dialogue later on. You get some of your first glances of Mother Marcos. You get Susie's mom dying like in bed with this weird disease that I don't know if I completely understand. But yeah, I think those were effective. But this is the kind of thing that would scare away a lot of people. You know what I mean? Like
A casual horror film.
yeah, like oh, this is so random. Who cares?
Yeah.
I liked it though.
I figured you would. I think like the editing is really smart, and I appreciate it. And I think you do get like more vivid color through moments like that, and then it's not super jarring because like when Susie's dancing for the first time, there was like a image of like a hand almost like pushing up through the floor.
And that's why she's so obsessed with the ground,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting, I guess.
Clitoral stimulation. Sorry. Yeah, there was like a weird thing where she's like levitating up a fucking door frame. Shit like that. Super bizarre. Where I think you can't really tell like reality from dream, which I think is smart, but it is kind of overindulgent in a way where I think it kind of...
This is your artsy, like people smelling their own farts type thing.
Fuck you. Oh, shit.
I think that on an emotional level, this movie is very cold for the most part. But when Dr. Klemper reunites with what we come to find out is like an apparition of his wife, I think it actually gets kind of heartwarming for a few moments.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, look at that.
And his wife is portrayed by, have you already looked this up?
Yeah, I know this.
It's Jessica Harper, who played the protagonist, Susie, in the original Suspiria, which I think is very cool.
Yeah, it's a good callback. It pays a little bit of homage, even though it's completely derailed from the original. It is one of the few moments in the film where I think, yeah, it is. You're right. It is extremely cold, and I did feel for the guy, and then I immediately thought like, oh god, how is this gonna go wrong? Because this has got to get fucking ruined somehow.
God, I mean, we get a pretty long sequence of them walking through like the security checkpoint at the Berlin Wall, only for Klemper to somehow end up out front of the dance hall again, the dance studio.
I knew it was coming because they had already alluded to him being the witness.
Yeah,
I'm like, he's got to end up there somehow. It was a really good shot, like a POV shot of like them coming to snatch him out from the front door.
It's the one jump scare of the movie.
And they're like screaming like fucking vultures or like harpies, you know what I mean? Like they feel so bird-like.
On my first viewing, this actually got to me. Like them coming out to scare him like that, like it scared me a little bit, and that usually doesn't happen
fucking
to me.
Pussy, you didn't get me. You didn't get scared by the fucking crunching of many bones.
That was like drawn out.
Oh my god, it was fucking terrible. I'll never forget that. Thank you for that. Now when my wife gives birth one day, I'm gonna think about that. I'm like, oh my god, that baby's in there crunching that shit up.
Did you think that she was actually there?
Yeah. I mean, for a second, and then for some reason I thought, I'm like, oh, she's a witch. She's in on it too.
Oh, that would have been a bullshit fucking twist if that's what they did.
I wouldn't have been surprised.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been surprised, but I would have been so hateful if that happened. But it does give you like this false sense of hope for a moment. And I think it's incredibly sad when she disappears and you do get that POV shot where it's just him outside on this snowy street, like by himself for a moment. And then the film decides to get absolutely fucking batshit crazy for the next 20 minutes.
Yeah, it does. Oh, Jesus Christ.
I think I've already said that I hate the final act of this movie.
I gotta put the sunglasses back on for this. I gotta protect myself.
Okay. How'd you feel about all of this? I
was very scared for my well-being. And then I think I texted you when this was happening, and I just said, I forget, I have to pull it up. You got your phone on you?
Yeah, I can read the text.
I was just like, okay, really? This is fucking stupid now.
When I do these weirder movies, you do tend to give me updates on what's going on. You just said, at this point, what the fuck?
Yeah, I'm just like, really, dude? God, what a way to drop the ball.
Yeah. You know what? I actually don't mind the scene, like when it starts out, or we're getting like this ritual chanting and all this dancing. I do think that the disembowelment of a few of these characters is a little too much.
God. I want to say the composition of the way this room's set out is perfect. It's great. It looks exactly what it's designed for, a big fucking ritual.
Yeah.
It's like really good, like the interior architecture of like almost like this stone cut masonry, slender orchestra hall type of look to it, like a stair leading down to the dance floor.
Did you realize that the walls were made out of human hair?
No, I didn't.
I didn't either. I read this today and was surprised by that.
I just thought it was like cement.
There's like hair hanging from the walls.
Jesus Christ.
And I guess like it took the crew weeks to strand all this hair together to put on the walls.
Oh my God.
And then
I would have killed myself.
me and you just didn't notice it was there. So sorry, Luca.
I'd have to be like they had to have had like a therapist on set for all these fucking crew, like handling human hair. Ugh, that's gross. I think it's a great scene the way it starts out. And I think I texted you and I just said like we're really going there is when fucking Mother Blanc gets like her head severed off, and it was like the dumbest looking shot.
Yeah.
I was like, that is so stupid looking. I'm like, I'm not even afraid anymore. This is just fucking stupid.
Everything from the moment that Susie walks into the room, like from that moment on, it becomes so incredibly, laughably bad.
Why like the 12 frames per second slow motion?
Ah, dude, you're asking the wrong guy.
Why was that choice made? It felt like, and the camera work was fucking atrocious. Like moving through this scene was so fucking bad. It was so bad.
It's weird, man, because the cinematography and the editing had been pretty damn good for most of the movie, at least. I mean, there might have been a few spots here and there where I think the stylistic direction was a little distracting, but it like really comes to a head right here. The big frustrating thing for me is that the entire movie, we're alluding to Mother Marcos, like, this big figure that's something to be scared of. And then we come into the scene and, she's just tucked into this weird corner of this room. She looks like Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah.
Basically, this character design it could have been scary, but God, it's Tilda Swinton in a big rubber suit. It looks so bad. I don't know, man. What was up with this?
Yeah, it becomes laughable. You get all the way to the end zone and you fumble, and like the other team runs away with the ball to the other end zone. Like,
it's not like it was a very good game up until that point either. It wasn't a great game. And then we're shitting the bed, very badly. Like,
I think like one of the I bought into it completely until Mother Blanc got her head severed, because you get like this, she's like, you have to completely renounce your own mother and accept me as your mother, and like you get like this really interesting, this red just washes the screen slowly, and you get a cut back to the mother back in Ohio. It becomes like, I'm like, oh, here we go, it's beginning, like it like the ritual has begun. And then right then and there, it's just like
some shit just starts happening.
It's just fucking. It's just so laughable, because the film is capable of taking a very disturbing, disgusting, you can lean into these rituals that are fucking atrocious, and then it just becomes campy B-movie, and it's like,
it had taken itself so seriously up until this point before diving headfirst into B-movie quality, is a good way to put it.
It was just laughable because she's just walking up to people and blowing their heads up, and I'm just like so confused as to why that was a decision made. I mean, I get it. Okay, sure, she's gonna go kill all these people for sure.
That like voted for Marcos.
Sure,
like, yeah.
Sure, I get behind that, but the execution was so poor. God, like the quality just drops off. It feels like they ran out of money. Like they're just right there. It felt like the flow of money stopped right there, and they were working like on the weekend to finish this shit up. It was like, are you fucking serious?
Yeah.
Because then I'm just like, why?
Yeah.
I'm like, why? Well, then what was the whole fucking point?
I'm also frustrated that there's like such a lack of the sense of space in this room once things start happening, because we have this demon thing come in that's I guess is supposed to be like the embodiment of death. And then I know there's a shot of
I think it's supposed to be like her true form.
Yeah.
It's just so bizarre.
But there's a shot of it being introduced into the room, and I'm like, okay, where is this in the room? And then like this thing is moving around the room, and I'm like, okay, where is it right now? Like I didn't understand like where things were placed in the room. I hated the way that Marcos was tucked into this corner when she was supposed to be like
at the head almost.
Yeah, like she should have been like on a throne or something. It was so awkward.
Like I think the choreography for the dancers was fucking awesome. Like having these people pose, like it was very intense. I mean, it felt something right out of like Robert Edgar's playbook. I mean, it was very smart. It just becomes like extremely stupid. And at the end, when I knew I was going to walk into this podcast, I just thought to myself, I'm like, oh, like I can talk about this. This is fucking. Like, this is easy. Like, this is a piece of cake for me to talk about.
Does it feel like it lightened the load of everything that came before it?
Yeah, and I still had like that like I told you last night, I'm like, dude, I have an interview tomorrow. And I had like some residual anxiety from being put through like this uncomfortable ringer. And by the end, I was just like, oh, the climax was such a miss that I'm okay. I'm fine. Yeah, I just think it was, God, it felt like RoboCop, or like it felt like 80s, like the use of practical effects was so poor, and then they used CGI to like behead people and blow people's heads up.
Dude, the CG blood was terrible.
So bad.
It really bugged me because we're like sitting in this slow motion, like, how would you say this? Like the frames per second were like very low, and you had all these dancers kind of in the background.
And there's such a blur.
There's blood everywhere. But like the dancers aren't getting blood on them, so you know that it's not there, like on set or anything. God, it was such a misfire. And then we've mentioned this earlier, but Tom York's song "Unmade" is being played over all of this chaos and destruction, and it's such an elegant and beautiful song. It almost feels like a bad music video for it.
I think what bothers me is because the film is extremely capable of excellent sound design, and it does end up feeling like what you said, a bad music video. It feels like you can barely hear what's going on in the film at that moment because the song is being so heavily brought forward. Like maybe if there was a choice to not have a lyrical track and make it just the instrumental, and you could separate the two in the way you release them for the soundtrack,
put the lyrics in the credits scene or something.
It just felt very bizarre. And there's like dialogue going on where you finally get, like she ends up like granting death to
like our previous nice characters from earlier in the movie
because they want to die because they're like in this state of limbo, trance state. It's so, I don't know.
There's something very amateur stage play like about the way she puts them down. Like, what do you want? I want to die. And like she puts her hand on them and they just kind of like fall over in a really limp fashion.
Yeah.
And of course all the dialogue, because this is like a big scene with music playing, it's all ADR'd on top of it with super heavy reverb. So it sounds like shit.
Yeah.
It sounds like shit.
It's so bad. And like again with the camera work, it's just like it's not even disorienting. It just feels so amateur, like a high schooler with a camcorder. It's really frustrating. Where I think with how this scene is set up and the composition, and it is so elegant and like geometric with all like these human forms everywhere, and like everybody's in sync, and there's like limbs, and it almost feels like it's creating like pentagrams, and it's really beautiful. Where like you could have made the scene stationary, like the camera could have been stationary, and you could have mutilated bodies, you could have separated people in half and like done crazy shit, really go over the top with it, make it disturbing, make it like somewhat elegant, mutilate the human form. But it just felt like we were going like on a merry-go-round and watching people's heads explode. It just felt like such a waste of, you were setting up all this beautiful dance choreography just to like toss it away.
It was very trashy.
Yeah, and what should be the pinnacle of the dance routines that have been happening. You know what I mean? Because it had been alluded to that, oh, you gave in to your own self, and so you messed up the dance because you would get heavy breathing, and it almost felt like all the girls were dancing in unison, and their breathing was the same, and they didn't even know why. It felt so ritualistic, and then you do that at the end, and what should be the best part, it should be the peak of that, and you cast all of it out, and it's just like, we're going to have Tom York wail over heads exploding. It just felt so stupid. I don't know. I'm very frustrated.
I think in concept it's fine, but God, this execution was so sloppy, so shitty.
The camera work was so like I can't believe, I literally cannot believe they chose to put 12 frames per second slow motion, like TV slow motion. Like, it's fucking terrible.
Because of our lack of knowledge of really what's going on or why it all matters, you're right. It rings so hollow. Mm-hmm. Like, it has no impact whatsoever. Like, it's the most frustrating thing. And we have to sit through another 10 minutes of epilogue after this that I think is also misguided.
Why does she have to come across as like an empathetic demon? I don't understand it.
I think it's supposed to be like a passing of the torch where this new regime, it won't be like what's this called? Like abusing power the way that Marcos did. Or like this new regime of the witches under Susie will be a lot nicer. Because like Susie goes and visits Klimper at his home the day after and like erases his memory of all the horrible things and says like, I'm sorry what happened to you, but I wasn't in the position to like stop it really. And I kind of get like that's what they're going for. But God, like the way the movie ends off where she erases his mind and then we get this random cut to his little village house where it just shows like the heart ingrained into his house with like his wife's his initials on it. Yeah. And it ends off on that. And I'm like, how am I supposed to feel about that? Like, he didn't really feel like the main character. That wasn't the main theme of the story. I didn't know what to make of it.
I felt like a bunch of time had passed, too. It was so bizarre.
Yeah, because there's a woman on her cell phone in that scene. So it must be like 30 years later at least.
So bizarre.
Yeah, man. They fucked it.
Why? Yeah, by the end, you're just like, why? I don't even know how to, like, rate it.
I don't know either.
I mean, like, maybe like a 5 out of 10, like, honestly.
I think after my first viewing, I thought it was like a 7-ish. Like, I was very perplexed and interested in the movie. I might go with a light 6, and that'd be like very
generous.
Very generous. And it sucks because I think the movie has a lot going for it.
I agree. All the things that were done well were fucking awesome, and I unfortunately think the things that hold the film back,
they're really bad.
It's really bad. Excuse me. But I think if the ending wasn't fumbled like the way it was, I think I'd have been comfortable with the 7. I would have been like, okay, in spite of all the mishaps, I get it. You know, I'd have been like, I get it. You know, you can't get everything right. You know, maybe they could have ditched this, but God,
we're talking about a total disaster of a last act.
Mm-hmm. And that's super frustrating. And like, I don't know. At this point, I'm like, okay, where's your test screenings? Where's your rewrites? Where's your...
This feels like the director's cut.
They don't destroy like a set until way after the fact. I'm like, you could have reshot this.
Yeah.
I'm like, you could have shown the studios and it could have been poor reception-wise, but they'd have been like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you X amount of dollars. We're going to reshoot this scene and we're going to fix it and we're going to try to bring back together in the final edit. But for some reason, like, this felt like the sketch for the final drawing, and then someone had been like, nah, you got to cut that out. Let's make it more focused here. It should be more... I loved all like the artsy stuff because I thought it really worked well.
And you thought it was leading to something.
Yeah,
right?
And I thought like it was going to be like really heavy iconography and really lean into the human form and just like make it like really like mystical and magical and like really occult. But God, it was so fucking boring.
I thought there would be like themes and symbolism to disassemble and like all that stuff is real loose and messy. I think it says a lot that when you have these art house horror movies, especially in modern day with films such as The Witch, Hereditary, where like those will get really high critic scores, but then you might have casual moviegoers saying like, it's boring, it's pointless, it's too artsy. Suspiria is like hated even among like this audience, like this art house audience. Like people that love the original hate this movie. People that love artsy films hate this movie.
And I've seen people that have defended the film.
Oh yeah,
I've seen that, and I'm like, and then I look at myself, and I'm like, they're like, it's like every time I rewatch it, it gets better, and I'm like, how on earth do the last 20 minutes work for you in any way?
This has a 3.7 on Letterboxd out of 5.
Yeah,
which is pretty high.
I would give it like a 2, maybe out of 5.
I would probably give it like a 3. I don't know how that would average out with like my 6 out of 10, but
I don't know.
It's a mixed bag. It's so frustrating because I think there's a lot of potential here.
Yeah, fuck it. Fuck them. Just fuck them.
You know, Luca Guadagnino, his next film, which comes out very soon, is called Bones and All.
Yep.
With Timothy Chalamet. Scenes filmed right here in Middletown, Ohio, by the way.
Heroin capital of the world, baby.
Exactly. The perfect setting for a horror film. I think his next movie is a horror film, again.
Yeah, it's leans into cannibalism.
Yeah.
I think it takes the romantic drama element. I think it takes that path as well.
Okay. I would see it.
Yeah,
you know,
I'd be down.
I'm intrigued.
It's got old Chalamet in it. I think he plays a side character, like he plays the love interest.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see. I think we'll be okay. It's just I'll never want to watch the film again because I don't think I'm ever going to get anything more out of it.
Yeah,
which is frustrating. But
I've seen it 3 times, and that'll be the last for many years at least. But it lived in my head for a long time, and I think that having this conversation with you about it is like
a release,
like an exorcist from me.
You ready to wrap this thing up?
Yeah, I'm down. Do you want to get into your recommendation?
Yeah, I think I was gonna do a film, but I don't think I want to take that light of an approach. I am gonna do a film though. I'm gonna do a music film, like a film centered around music. I've not seen this movie.
Okay.
I'm gonna do The Sound of Metal.
Dude, I want to see this movie so bad.
I've never seen it, and I've been really wanting to. Like, we just got a drum set down here a couple weeks ago, but I've been really wanting to do something in this lane. I was like, God, I want to do Whiplash so bad, but
we're so familiar with it.
Yeah, we've talked about it so much off the air, and don't get me wrong, we can do that film one day because I think we'll get a lot out of it, and I think it'll be a short but fun talk. Part of me wanted to do Soul tonight, but I've talked about that film a lot on the podcast and off air with you, and I think we should venture into a film that kind of takes a similar route, like heavily centered around music, and it's a character drama. And I didn't know if you had seen this yet, so
I have not.
But I've been wanting to so bad, and I think it's a good reason to watch it, is just to do it for the podcast. And I know it's praised. I think we'll dig it. I'm excited because neither of us have seen it, so we can come to it together.
This is weird. This actually was going to be one of my next at least 2 or 3 recommendations.
Hell yeah.
Like it was in the works.
Hell yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, man. I'll probably pick it up on Criterion when they do their the Barnes & Noble do their half off sale, like near Black Friday and stuff. So we can fucking sit there and watch special features like a bunch of fucking goobers.
I'd be so down with that.
But yeah, man, it'll be fun. I don't think it'll necessarily be lighthearted, but I think it'll be a little bit.
It won't be this.
Yeah, I don't like horror, and I want to feel, but I want to feel good or like somewhat existential but optimistic at the same time. And I think it might scratch that itch for us. So don't do this to me again, please. God damn it.
Hey, at the very least, it'll be another year.
Yeah, you didn't do Midsommar, which I appreciated a lot. I was so afraid.
You've specifically requested to never do it, so. Yeah. I never will.
God, you have to put like a bullet or a gun to my head to get me to watch that film. I refuse.
Although this was kind of close to the vibe in many ways.
God.
I mean, this is one of the 3 films this month I've seen that ends with naked people chanting. With Midsummer, The Witch, and then Suspiria all had that going on.
I think you got a fetish that I just found out about.
I didn't know how these ended.
You were born in the wrong time, my friend. Anyway, that's all I got. It was fun. God, hey, next Halloween, next spooky season, let's do a fucking classic, okay? Let's do fucking Halloween or something, all right?
Okay.
All right. Don't give me the fucking weird shit. That's all I got. We'll about to record bonus, which will be fun. But if you stick around for that, we're doing Kanye ranked here shortly. But that's all I got. Get her if you do me the honors.
Adios.